it's Lou back again. If you remember, in the last episode, I told you that we decided to take a big group trip together to celebrate the end of the semester. Well, everything was going great at first, but then when we were on our cruise, things started to go downhill. Naomi caught Jeremy cheating on her. I found out my parents had filed for bankruptcy, and then to top it all off, I started receiving nasty hate mail forcing me to leave the mansion immediately. So one night, I decided to leave Plutus Heights. I clearly wasn't welcome there, but David spotted me leaving and made me come back home with him so that we could sort it all out. Everybody was so confused about why David had called an emergency meeting. No one had a clue what was going on. Mark saw me crying, so he rushed over to comfort me. And that's when David told everyone that I'd been receiving threats and hate mail over the past week, and that the person who'd written them had said I should leave the mansion ASAP. I looked around the room, and everyone was suddenly suspicious of each other. David spoke up and said,
"Whoever wrote these letters is a coward, and I'm gonna find out which of you did it and kick you out. This kind of bullying is not acceptable at Plutus Heights. Lou, show them the letters."
So I pulled the letters out of my bag and handed them around. Suddenly, Naomi said, "Could it be?" We all went silent and stared at her, waiting for her to finish the sentence, but she didn't say anything more.
Mark got mad and said, "Just spit it out! Say it already!"
Naomi continued, "I'm not sure, but a few days ago I went to Aaliyah's room to get my lipstick that she borrowed. I accidentally dropped it under her bed, and when I picked it up, I found a piece of paper with the letter E that looked like it had been cut out of a magazine or something. Now, looking at this letter, it looks pretty familiar. Aaliyah, it was you, wasn't it?" This made me so confused. "Naomi, do you know what you're talking about? How could it be Aaliyah?" But Naomi was adamant. "The evidence is all there, Lou." "I think this is some kind of misunderstanding," I said. "Aaliyah would never do that." Then suddenly, Aaliyah interrupted us. "Just stop it. Yes, it was me. I wrote those letters, okay? You act like you're some angel, but I've seen the real you. You're a snake. You knew I liked Mark, and I asked you to help us become a couple. But what do? You go behind my back and betray me and steal him from me. You're a traitor. You don't deserve to live here, and you definitely don't deserve to have friends like us." Oh my God, I couldn't hold back my tears. I burst out crying, and Naomi rushed over to hug me. Mark said,
"Stop this. Aaliyah, you're insane. I don't like you, and I never will. What were you thinking?"
I kept crying as I said, "This is why I wanted to leave the mansion. I don't belong here." "Yeah, get the heck out of here. I can't stand living under the same roof as you. Thank God you finally get it." Aaliyah looked at me and spoke in a sarcastic tone. David suddenly stepped in and said,
"The only person who needs to leave is you, Aaliyah. I can't believe how cruel you are. I vote that Aaliyah leaves the house right now. Who's with me?"
Everybody raised their hands, except me. I was just standing there looking at the ground, wishing it would swallow me up. Then Mark said,
"Okay, it's been decided. Aaliyah will leave Plutus Heights. Lou's staying."
At that, Aaliyah lost it. "You traitors! You'll regret this!" she screamed. Then she left and went to her room, slamming the door behind her. We could hear her noisily packing up her room. Then she called her butler to pick her up. I couldn't believe it. How could she treat me like this? I thought we were close friends. A few days later, Naomi also moved out. She couldn't stand being around Jeremy anymore. This made me want to leave too, because the house just felt filled with sad memories now. And also, I couldn't exactly afford it anymore. I called Naomi to tell her this, and she asked me if I wanted to move in with her. Without even thinking about it, I said yes. And I'm so glad I did, because Naomi and I had so much fun living together. We comforted each other and helped each other get over the drama with Jeremy and Aaliyah. We started to do everything together. Shopping, eating out, and I even went with Naomi to some of her modeling shoots. Sometimes we even had movie nights where we'd curl up on the sofa together. Occasionally, I'd noticed Naomi not paying attention to the movie, but just staring at me. And one time I joked, "I know, I'm beautiful." Right? She just laughed and turned away. Then one night, we went to our favorite bar for cocktails. We were having such a fun night, but I think we drank a bit too much, because Naomi told me something that shook me to my core. "Lou, I need to tell you something. I've wanted to tell you for so long. I'm in love with you." I laughed. "I love you too, Naomi." But then Naomi hiccuped and said, "No, Lou, I love you. Like, I'm in love with you. Why else would I ask you to come live with me?" Oh my God. What? I slowly backed away from Naomi and didn't know where to look. This was so horribly awkward. Firstly, I wasn't a lesbian. Secondly, I was dating Mark. And thirdly, was Naomi crazy? "Naomi, you've got this all wrong. I thought we were just best friends. I'm not interested in you in that way. Sorry." I waited for her to reply, and she just smiled and said, "No, I get it. It's okay. Forget about it. I'm just drunk. It's fine. We can still be friends, right?" After that, we went home, and it was so awkward. All I wanted to do was go to bed and wake up and forget it ever happened. Lucky me, after that night, Naomi never mentioned it again. Maybe she knew I was feeling awkward, so she tried to be as cheerful and natural as possible. Even though our conversations were still a bit awkward, but that's okay. I really hoped that it was just a temporary feeling, and Naomi would quickly forget it so that we could remain close friends as we were now. And about Mark, ever since I'd moved in with Naomi, I hadn't seen him as much. Recently, we'd sometimes gone 3 or 4 days without even speaking, and when I called him, he'd often say he was busy and he'd call me back, but he never did. It seemed like there was something wrong, and it made me worried. Then, something terrible happened to our relationship on the day we were supposed to celebrate our 6-month anniversary. On that day, he took me to a fancy French restaurant, and out of surprise, we bumped into Mark's parents, who had just finished eating and were on their way out. Mark looked surprised to see them and said,
"Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?"
His dad spoke up and said,
"We just had dinner with some business partners. And who's this lovely lady? Aren't you going to introduce us?"
Mark said,
"Oh, right, sorry. This is Lou. Her family owns a chain of famous restaurants. Your favorite one, remember?"
Then his dad looked shocked and said,
"Hang on. Is she the daughter of the family who just went bankrupt?"
It was so awkward. Mark suddenly went bright red, and then his dad said,
"You don't really have a brain, do you? What are you doing hanging out with her? She's a nobody. She's got nothing left. A family like hers would just be a burden. Don't you care about your future?"
Then, to my astonishment, he looked at Mark with an absolute determination.
"Do you know how hard your mom and I worked so that you have a secured future? Break up with her immediately. Don't let me see you with her again."
I didn't know how to react and just waited for Mark to stand up to his dad, but all he said was,
"Okay, Dad, I understand."
I couldn't believe it. Then his dad said,
"Great. Your mother will set you up on a blind date with a girl that is more worthy of you. Won't you, dear?"
Then they left and didn't even look at me. I was shaking with rage as I turned to Mark. Never in my life had anyone spoken about me like that before, right in front of me. And the worst part was that Mark hadn't even stood up for me. Not once. What just happened? Why didn't you stand up for me? How could you let him talk to me like that? He's such a... Mark didn't let me finish my sentence and interrupted me angrily, saying,
"Don't you dare. That's my dad. And anyway, what he said wasn't entirely wrong."
I was fuming by this point. Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Don't I mean anything to you? You didn't even say no when he mentioned the blind date. Mark told me to calm down and said,
"Chill, Lou. It's just a blind date. I'll meet her to keep my parents happy, but obviously I'll reject her. You don't need to worry."
I was shocked. Unbelievable! So, You just do everything to please your parents, don't you? Don't you have your own opinion? You're like a little sheep to them. Mark suddenly exploded and said, "How dare you!" I could see he was seriously angry because he gave me a look that I'd never seen before. I couldn't bear it, so I just rushed out of the restaurant in tears. He didn't even bother to chase after me. When I got home, I went straight to my room and buried myself under the covers. I'd never been so disappointed in my life. The way Mark just stood there as his dad badmouthed me and my family? How could he let him do this to me? That weekend, I wanted to try to forget about my sadness. I was sick of lying in bed feeling sorry for myself, so I asked Naomi, Will, and David if they wanted to go on a trip with me. David said we could go stay at his private resort, and so that's what we did. We played golf, got spa treatments, and went to the beach. It cheered me up a bit, but every time I thought about Mark, I got sad again. One evening, Will and I were lying on the beach watching the sunset. Naomi and David were down by the water, and she was doing some high-fashion poses while David took pics of her. Will turned to me and said,
"How are you feeling now? Better, I hope."
I wasn't expecting him to ask me that, so I just said, "What?" "Oh, yes. I'm feeling better, thanks. Much more relaxed." Then Will asked if he could share something with me, and I told him sure. I couldn't believe what he said.
"Lou, I think you should chat to Mark and ask him if he sees a future for the two of you. If he says no, then maybe you should move on."
Hearing Will say that, another guy, it really made me question my relationship with Mark. I just assumed we'd be together forever, which was probably so dumb of me. What if Mark really didn't see a future for us? It was too much to even think about. I didn't want to lose him, even though he'd hurt me so much by not standing up for me. I didn't know what to say, so I asked Will what he would do if he was in Mark's shoes. He looked at me and took a deep breath. Then he said,
"Honestly, Lou, if you were my girlfriend, I would have stood up for you no matter what. I'd never let anyone hurt you. Never."
Then he looked me right in the eyes and didn't stop staring at me. I'd never seen him look at me like this before. What did it mean?